My Hero Academia has officially leapt from the frying pan and into the fire, as with the conclusion of the heroes versus villains war, we now find ourselves approaching a major prison break. Which at face value, I'm sure doesn't sound worse at all, but we are talking about the release of All For One, the worst villain in the country's history. Right now, his spirit has seized control over Shigaraki's body and intends to free his real self. This stuff can get really confusing really fast if you let it, so allow me to alleviate that and explain to you all what is going on and why this is so damn terrifying. The spirit of All For One is unrelenting. He has no intentions of giving the heroes a chance to catch their breath and recover. His plan is to strike while they're most vulnerable, and that is right now. Because of this, he has sent a handful of near high-end Nomu, who have now stabilized for the most part, to Tartarus, the most secure prison in the country, and nobody can stop him. The heroes are beaten and battered, they've exhausted every resource and power at their disposal, and even now are running around intent on damage control and preserving some semblance of public acceptance following the now thoroughly ruined depiction of them across the board. And so at this point, the Nomu can just stroll in with no issue at all and release All For One onto the world. Now, what makes this especially scary for me is that All For One predicted this. Prior to his defeat at the hands of All Might during their final battle, which he predicted to be the case, he had prepared for this very moment. He gave the doctor specific instructions and also gave his quirk up in exchange for a clone of it. Really and truly, the foresight of this man is unlike anything we have ever seen before, even beyond that of Sir Night-Eye, which we will get back to a bit later. Now, in knowing that he would end up in Tartarus, what benefits to this can we assume that he would have assumed? Well, keeping himself from Shigaraki allowed his protege to come into his own and become the man he is today. Which just goes to show how much faith All For One has in him and has had in him since he was just a boy. But besides all that, I must say that to All For One, Tartarus must be like a quirk candy store. I mean, this place houses society's greatest threats and villains who may be assumed to have some marvelous powers at their disposal. And All For One has considered quirks that would suit Shigaraki before, and so he could very well come back bearing gifts for his young pupil. Additionally, he could return with more villains to support the cause, seeing as how he is such a looming influence and Shigaraki has kind of lost the vast majority of his forces at this point. I mean, if nothing else, he could return with the very first Nomu that we ever saw, the USJ Nomu, since he's there as well. And lest we forget about Kurogiri, which would be all kinds of complicated at this point. But with that, let's try and understand All For One's reasoning behind his recent actions. And I mean this both as a spirit within the quirk and in the flesh. All For One's newfound control over Shigaraki is not only disturbing visually, but contextually as well. Why in the world would he have gone to all this trouble just to take the man over like Venom? And maybe you could argue that as such a long-lived being, he just wants to live even longer, and now has a powerful host in the form of Shigaraki. But I can't imagine that to be true. All For One may be a manipulative and truly diabolical man, but one thing he doesn't really do is lie. When you're as powerful and generally untouchable as All For One, what reason would you have to lie to those who are lesser than you? And as we can infer from the latest chapter, there is no sort of intermediate communication between the proper All For One and the spirit of the quirk. They are two different entities. It's just like how the predecessors of One For All are deceased, however their spirit is still incarnated within the power itself. And so although the spirit of All For One is taking over Shigaraki's body currently, that doesn't mean that All For One himself is in control of Shigaraki, if that makes any sense. It gets confusing, but try and understand. And for a man as powerful and long-lived as All For One, there are only certain things that really and truly matter. All For One is an OG villain. He has been in the game since the very beginning, since it started. And so I'm sure he's enjoyed the leisure of wealth and admiration. He's beyond that. At this point, he is a man of legacy. In regards to Shigaraki being his successor and such, I completely believe that to be true and still his intention. In the world of One For All, despite overwhelming Shigaraki, he still called for his strength and spoke of how the world had responded to Shigaraki's power. He speaks of Shigaraki's incubation, hatred, and growth as if yet to be truly realized. He is in the driver's seat right now, yes, but only because Shigaraki is still on training wheels. And with all this in mind, I truly believe that All For One wants Shigaraki to kill him. This would be the ultimate test and subsequent ascension of the world's greatest villain. Ideally, one would aspire to have a successor who would succeed them in every way and become better. And to truly cement and prove that, he would need to dominate his master's will and crush him physically. Now, it may take some time for Shigaraki to overpower his master's will and dominate him in the physical, but I would say that that would signify his 100% incubation. Once again, he is no longer a test tube baby, and so we do not have percentages on the screen, and so how would we as viewers be able to recognize that Shigaraki is ready to face Deku and ready to take One For All? We would need something drastic, something significant, and this is probably it. This would be what would allow his master to pass on the baton truly and recognize that Shigaraki is truly ready. I can't imagine anything that would satisfy All For One more than this. The only thing to come close would be the crushing of One For All, which brings us back to the prediction of Sir Night-Eye, who foresaw the death of All Might. One of our very first videos on this channel being a prediction of All Might's demise, and I still stand by a number of those points presented. One thing I specifically remember All For One saying to All Might in prison was that he should have died to spur on his successor, Deku's growth, just as his incarceration would serve to do so in the case of Shigaraki. However, All For One clearly foresaw his incarceration, which would imply All Might's victory. Therefore, even with him now being out of action, I don't think All For One has forgotten about All Might, especially not after their history with one another. All For One knows just how to push Deku's buttons and finds him to be pitifully worthless. And with how vindictive and cruel he can be, killing All Might sounds rather plausible at the moment. But let me know what you guys think about all this in the comments. I love everything about All For One. The man is truly larger than life, and so to get him back in some capacity is just so exciting to me. But really, the heroes are just down bad. They're looking like 2020 hit them as well. But you know what? New year, new fears, because All For One is here. And you should be too, so make sure you're subscribed to the channel with notifications on for all the crazy stuff we have planned for you. Because when it comes to bringing you some of the best My Hero Academia content on the platform, Plot Armor has you covered. As always, I am Slice of Otaku, Happy New Year, and thank you all so much for watching and have an awesome day. I love you.